And this evening's video, we have the return of scary Reddit stories, but this evening we are not on the No Sleep Reddit thread, but on the Let's Not Meet Reddit page, which last Wednesday's members exclusive video was 3 stories from this page, and I said how I find this Reddit subreddit, that's the word I'm looking for, so much more scary than the No Sleep one. Just the realism of these stories and the fact they're allegedly real accounts, I just find it a bit more creepy. But let me know which one you prefer down below. But yeah, we're gonna have a nice long video today whispering through some of these true scary stories. But if you want more, as I said, last Wednesday's was a Let's Not Meet video as voted for by my lovely membership community. So for £2 a month, if you fancy that, then feel free. Plug over. I think it's time to get nice and relaxed, and potentially more importantly, nice and scared. So let's get into story number 1. Okay, so our first story is titled "I Got a Cop Fired and Now I Think He's Stalking Me." To give context, I used to be a 911 dispatcher for a small city. We dispatched all law, fire, EMS for the entire county, and within this county were multiple law agencies. I'd been there for about 3 months or so when I met him. Let's call him Jake. Jake had recently transferred from a big department in California and landed himself randomly at our department. It didn't make much sense as to why he left California in the first place, but he always insisted it was just time for him to move to a smaller and less dangerous department. Him and I quickly became close and would chat almost every day after I got off shift. Within a few months it became apparent that we liked each other and our flirting progressed into something more serious. Fast forward a few months later and it turns out he was doing some inappropriate things to photos, videos of me whilst he was actively on duty. This and a few other things he had committed on duty led him to lose his license and leaving. During the process of his termination, his sergeant has suggested I get a protective order against him as he made threatening statements previously towards me, such as "you better be telling the truth," "I'll find out on Tuesday if you're lying to me," etc. I began to fill out the paperwork and was told I had a temporary protective order on him in the meantime, but I don't think I ever did. About 2 weeks after his termination, he calls me to catch up. The entire call is like an old friend to an old friend. What am I doing for work? Do I have a boyfriend now? But progressively, the call turns more personal. When does my shift end? What do I drive? Being 18 and naive, I treated him like I always had, answering his questions. I had contacted his old department afterwards, as his sergeant had told me to let him know if I was ever contacted again. But they turned me away pretty quickly and didn't want anything to do with it. With that, I blocked Jake. Roughly a month later, I get a call from a new number and it's Jake. Once again, he wants to meet up and catch up, but this time he so casually goes on to tell me about this new house he's wanting to buy in my neighbourhood, knowing it's my neighbourhood. I had never told him where I lived in town, let alone what specific neighbourhood. During this call he got progressively more and more aggressive as well, making statements such as, "If I knew I was going to get canned, I should have just had my way with you." He half-heartedly joked about getting a hotel room just for me, and that was that. A few days later he FaceTimed me and once again came off as simply wanting to catch up, as he was sick. Midway through our seemingly normal conversation, he makes it apparent he's been touching himself this entire time. Keep in mind, nothing Nothing suggestive was mentioned, and our conversation at that point was about his new dog. He's blocked once again and has tried to follow my social media, and now I've started to see him in my area. Last I knew, he lived nearly 30 to 45 minutes in the opposite direction from me. Am I reading into this, or should I genuinely consider this stalking? Yeah, he's definitely stalking, 100%, and equally he has just been fired, so has a ton of time in his hands to be a creep, essentially. Yeah, I said it in the, I mean, this one is like physical stalking, but there was a story in the members exclusive one where this person was just getting hounded with phone calls, and I said, like, honestly, stalking has to be up there with one of the worst things that could, like, happen to a person. Particularly women, because there are some just scumbag men out there who just think they can do as they please. But anyway, that is creepy. Next one is a bit of a different tone, let's say, and potential trigger warning, although I guess all of these are trigger warnings, to be honest, but to do with shooting. So, this story is titled Active Shooter in My Apartment Building. This incident took place in the summer of 2023. Last year I transferred with my company to take a new position in a major Midwestern city. My spouse was still working and living back in California for the next few months. So I rented a studio apartment for myself in a newly renovated apartment building in a popular downtown neighborhood until we could look for a place together. The apartment was small but nice. It was in a secure building with interior hallways and a nice downstairs lobby. I was one of the first tenants to move into this newly renovated building, and other new residents soon started moving in. A major advantage of this move was that I'd only be a couple of hours drive from my hometown and my parents. I started my new job and everything was going great. I was enjoying my new neighbourhood, and the neighbours in the apartment building generally kept to themselves like I did. Then a new guy moved in across the hall and everything changed. We'll call him David. David was a single man in his 60s and was very different from the college students and young professionals who lived in our building. I started noticing his erratic behaviour almost immediately. I would come home from work and he would be sitting in his car in our small parking lot just staring off in the distance. We were having issues that summer with smoke clouds coming over from the vast Canadian wildfires. They were leaving a light dusting of ash on our car similar to pollen. David was convinced that someone was spraying this dust on his car and was accusing various tenants he would run into in the parking lot. He would hoard trash in his apartment and leave trash bags in the hallway, causing a foul odour. He would also be yelling to himself in the hallway. I finally had had enough and complained to the leasing office. The manager was quick to dismiss my concern, saying that she'd been in his apartment and everything was fine. In August, my parents' 50th anniversary was coming up, and I was excited to go home and spend a weekend with them. A few days before their anniversary, my boss informed me that he would be flying into work on an important project with me that would have us working through the weekend. I was really disappointed and felt like I was letting my parents down. But I managed to get away for a quick overnight trip in the middle of the week to see them and get back before my boss was due to arrive. I drove down and spent the night with them. The next morning I checked my email as I was getting ready to head back. There was an email from my apartment manager in regard to the incident the night before. The email was very vague, but it stated that a resident was dead and there would be further details coming later. My heart sank and I immediately went pale. My mind instinctively went to my strange neighbour David. I opened up a local news app for my my city, and the top story was about an active shooter in my apartment building who was killed during a SWAT team standoff the night before. Apparently David approached my next door neighbour in the hallway with a gun and threatened to shoot him. The neighbour ran into his apartment and called 911. David also called 911 and told the dispatcher that his neighbours were hacking his phone, and if the police didn't come he was going to start shooting people. The police came and tried to talk to David, but he had barricaded himself in his apartment and claimed to be heavily armed. The state police and the SWAT team soon arrived, and David began firing a rifle out his window at anyone he saw in the parking lot below. All of the neighbours on my floor were trapped in their apartments with no way of escape. They had to get down and barricade themselves from the gunfire. There was another building across the street with a direct line of sight into our apartment building. A police sniper took a position in the building across the street and shot David through his window. And they flew a drone into his open window and confirmed he was dead with a gun still in his hand. Luckily no one else was injured. I got home later that day to a bullet-riddled apartment building, and several neighbours who normally didn't speak to each other were hugging and crying and showing each other videos of the incident from their hiding places. I've never been so lucky to have been out of town. If my boss hadn't messed up my plans, I would have been home that night. I'm sorry David didn't get the mental health attention he needed, but he put so many lives in danger. That's what we call a butterfly effect. That's crazy. Your boss springing plans on you led to you not being involved in an active shooting. I mean, yeah, the man was clearly very unwell, but really it's just good that nobody was Right, which one should we go with next? Let's do this one, because these are always nice and scary. So, a near-home invasion while staying alone. I am a female, age 21. I don't know how long this will be. It took me about 4 days to be able to actually type this out. Got weird mini anxiety attacks when I tried. I'll be the first to admit that I've had a very can't happen to me complex, and that's kind of what occurred in this story. I'm a university student and live in a rental house with 5 other people. It's far from ideal, but in this housing outcry that we're living in, it takes that sting off us having to pay a bunch of money a month to exist in a box. This has relevancy, I swear. I got extremely lucky last weekend when the 5 of the roommates I had were all out for the weekend. This has never happened, so I was ecstatic to have the house to myself. I did the whole 21-year-old girl home alone stuff you can think of, watching movies with the volume loud, taking long showers, walking around the house without a bra, etc, etc. It was around 10 PM. I'd finished some homework and was relaxing with a glass of wine and watching some streaming services. It sounded briefly like there was something moving on the porch. We've had a fox in our yard before, and the thing used to make a lot of noise out there, so I assumed that to be the case. After hearing some fumbling the second time, I went over to check through the window. There was nothing there. As I'm turning to head back to the living room, a piece of cement flies through our kitchen window. I didn't know it was cement at the time, but not important. I think I peed myself a little bit when it happened, but I definitely screamed like a little girl. My moronic ass started unlocking the door to go outside, but common sense seized control of me again, and I locked the door back. I also ran to the back door to make sure it was still locked, even though it's glass and wouldn't make a difference. Oddly enough, at this time, my grandma's words came into my head about something her own mother told her, "If someone tries breaking into your house, turn the lights off. You know the inside of your house better than they do." I shut the lights off in the living room and managed to turn the TV off, which was hard because my hands were shaking. My dad used to give me and my siblings advice on protection measures, which were not resonating at this time. I secured myself in my upstairs bedroom, and I turned all of the lights out in the house as I passed them. While walking up the stairs, I could hear the doorknob shaking furiously from the front door. I don't know if there was more than one person, or if they realised they couldn't jump the fence to get into the backyard. While calling for emergency services on speaker, I secured my hunting knife to the end of my hockey stick with hot pink duct tape. If I was going to have to use it, at least I would look fabulous. I stayed in the dark holding my makeshift spear for what was probably about 15 minutes. I'm really glad I wasn't murdered in that amount of time. The operator told me police were coming, which they eventually did. Took a very unsettling amount of time. The only reason I left the bedroom in the first place was because I heard knocking on the door downstairs and the police lights were flashing through the window. Otherwise someone would have had to come in and physically pull me out of the room. Statement was given, but that's all they did. Literally all they did. Literally. Nothing else. Literally that. A very nice female officer stayed with me in the house and helped me clean up the glass until my brother showed up to bring me to his place for the rest of the weekend. I'd made an appointment with the doctor to get out on anxiety medicine as well as medicine for nightmares. I know I wasn't in any physical danger at that point, but I've had some very charming dreams about similar scenarios, and I was just finding it easier to stay awake. Maybe that's juvenile of me, but I'm human. Meds are working fine and I'm back at my house, with wall-to-wall people again, and honestly I don't hate that so much anymore. Please have a fun, safe weekend. Yeah, that's just so creepy. I think, like, I haven't had a thing like that happen before, but when I was at university, it wasn't like super common, but one thing that like burglars would do would be like, they wouldn't like break into your house, but like I knew someone who their house got robbed, but like the person didn't come in the house. What they do is they just like try the back door, and if it's open they'll just like look and see, because like a lot of people stupidly leave like car keys and stuff by the back door. And anyway, this girl who he lived with had her keys swiped, and it was kind of like a common thing. But one time I was at home and I was in the kitchen, and basically like our house, we never used the front door. The front door went straight into the living room, and like the front door was like there, and then you would like walk through like this like alley, like archway alley, to get to like the back doors of like the house next to us, ours, and then the house to the right of ours. But anyway, one time I was in the kitchen, and I knew my housemate was upstairs, and yeah, I was in the kitchen, and then I just heard like the door handle rattling like really hard. And then I think, I don't know if this is just my brain like connecting dots, but then I think I heard like, you know, when you like turn to like move, I think I heard like a shoe like scrape on like the concrete. But then anyway, I sort of like froze a little bit, but by the time I looked out, like there was nobody there, so like it doesn't quite compare to having some concrete thrown in through the wall, but like it's still creepy that like someone was trying to get into, you know, the place that you call home. So I'd say this person actually handled the situation pretty well. Pretty well. Next story is titled, "He wanted me to drive him to a place that doesn't exist." This week has been hectic. My 3 kids have the flu. Oldest was first, then my younger 2 caught it. After a visit to the clinic, I was heading to the CVS down the street from our house for their prescriptions. I decided last minute to drop my kids off at home with their dad so they could rest and I could go inside the store to pick up some Pedialyte. I consider our neighbourhood to be safe. I've taken walks after dark and never felt afraid. Most of our neighbours are older folks who have lived there over a decade. When I pulled up to the CVS, I parked on the side parallel to our street. It's darker on that side, but the entrance is right around the corner and well lit. There was a man standing outside. He walked in front of my car and I could hear him talking, but my music was kinda loud. I figured he was on the phone or something. No real red flags yet. My husband called me as the man walked back towards the corner adjacent to the entrance. I got out of my car still on the phone, telling my husband, "Yeah, kiddos have the flu. I'm picking up medicine at the CVS, etc." In a very pleasant voice, the man says to me, "Hey, I got a question for you. Do you know where Main Street is?" Assuming he is asking for directions or the location of something. I tell him I do. I'm still holding my phone to my ear. It's in a bright pink case, so I'm sure he could see it. Now, this man is standing directly in front of me. There is a pillar and a trash can behind him. Around the corner is a propane cage and a red box against the store's wall. Getting past him would put me in arm's reach. Next, he asks for a ride there, to a homeless shelter. It's very cold outside and he doesn't want to freeze. I empathised with him but said I couldn't. I offered to buy him gloves and or a blanket and to ask if an employee in the store could assist him in finding a ride. Sweet baby Jesus, this guy's face instantly changed to pure rage, then right back to pleasant. Well, you know what happens to homeless people stuck outside. You're going to help me. It's right down the street. I'm standing there unsure on what to do. My husband is on the phone asking what's going on. I gently tell the man that I don't feel comfortable doing that and that I have the flu and my husband is on the phone with me. I don't care about the flu. Now he's getting more angry and not moving away from my route into the store. I didn't want to turn my back on him to go back to my car, which was several feet away in the dark. While this guy's glaring at me, I decide to quickly walk past him. I had my mask from the clinic in my jacket pocket, so I pulled that out and held it in front of me while I moved towards the trash can. He looked disgusted but kept telling me that I needed to give him a ride. It's right down the street, he insisted. But I know where that street is and it's not as close as he says. He tried to guilt me and his words felt threatening, but he didn't actually threaten me verbally. Once I was around the corner, I rushed into the store straight to the pharmacy. My husband said he's calling the police. He heard the way the man was talking to me and said to stay in the store. My knees were shaking. I'm not usually the type to be so afraid when confronted. When I got to the pharmacy, I interrupted the pharmacist and a customer, apologising, then told them what happened. The pharmacist sent the store manager out, a tall guy with a long beard, looked like he doesn't take crap from people. The police had already arrived. The man was told to leave, which he did momentarily. He did come back inside the store to yell obscenities and something about me. Now the store manager has told him to get the F out. He's trespassing on the property. The cop came back to talk to me and told me she has arrested him many times. He's loud and likes to yell at people, but he is pharmacist had me hiding behind the screen where they give vaccines and left the half door to the pharmacy cracked open in case I needed to get out of there. The cop had also told me this guy's first and last name, as did the store manager. The prescriptions are finally filled and I leave the store. The police park next to my car to keep an eye on me. Oh, and the man refused a ride from the cop to the shelter. Later, I looked him up. His name is unique, so he was easy to find. Surprise, surprise, he has a long record spanning 3 states and several counties. Tons of public intoxication charges, DWI, urinating in public, assault and battery, and indecent exposure. I also looked up the homeless shelter. Yeah, as I thought, there isn't one where he wanted me to take him, but that area is super sketchy. Earlier today I went to the corner store across from the CVS and told my friend, the overnight shift employee, what happened. She kicks him out of the store and calls the police every time she sees him because he yells at and threatens customers. But he always takes off before the police arrive. I know I could have handled that better. I was blindsided by his instant shift from pleasant to filled with rage. Big thank you to the pharmacy team who kept me safe, and the store manager for confronting the creep. They didn't have to do all of that. I'm thankful my husband recognised I was in an unsafe situation over the phone. This man is still out there somewhere in my area. I'd say she's probably been a little harsh on herself. I'd say she actually handled it pretty damn well, to be honest. Like, she stayed calm, and she did, the sensible thing, not turning her back, made her way in, and then told plenty of people, and the police got involved. I'm not really sure what else she could have done, to be honest. This next account is titled "The Creepy Hotel Owner Who Thought He Could." After reading many of the stories on this subreddit, it reminded me that I have one I thought I had forgotten. I'm a South American woman, but have been living in the States for about 11 years now. I first moved to Colorado when I was 21, to a small mountain town of Silverthorne. I was recruited by an exchange student program for college students in South America to come to the USA, work and travel during summer break in the South. Up to that point I'd never seen snow in my life, so I was extremely excited to be living in a cold, snowy place for once. I was going to be working at a very popular hotel in the town of Frisco, not too far from the hostel that I was staying in. The hostel itself had its own creepy stories, but I won't talk about them in details at the moment. So far I didn't know exactly what kind of job I would be doing in the hotel. All I knew is that I was supposed to show up there on a certain date and time and talk to the owner, a Ukrainian-American guy that was probably in his mid-40s back then. So I show up, introduce myself with the basic English I had at the time, and tell him I'm excited to start working there. He gives me a weird, long stare, almost as if he was analysing me. He was a tall man with very pronounced eyebrows, so that kind of creeped me out for a second. He then showed me to the restaurant and said I'd be working there as hostess, besides delivering room service orders. I didn't really think my English was that good to be in close contact with the public back then, but he insisted. For those who are familiar with the area, this part of Colorado is not too far from Vail, so it's needless to say that they get very, very busy there during ski season, and I was dealing with customers from all over the world. That's when I also started helping out as a server during breakfast, and of course would get lots of orders wrong by my lack of English, which made the owner very mad. I remember one time that my co-worker and friend was taking a little bit longer to wipe down one of the tables when we had guests waiting to be seated. So he grabbed the towel from her hand, yelled at both of us to get out of his sight and stop being so damn useless. and then proceeded to throw the towel at her face. Let me just make a small note here to say that this girl was also an immigrant like me, with fantastic English and had been living in the country for years. But he would always try and find ways to show us how slow, dumb or inferior we were compared to him, an American citizen. Then at night, after the place had slowed down, he would then act all apologetic and buy us drinks at the bar, make forward comments about my appearance and even caress my legs. I was starting to feel uncomfortable around him and would always try to not be in the same room as he was. During work hours I would be focused on customers or talking to co-workers, and I would never make eye contact with him if he was present. On New Year's Eve that year there was a big incident in the hostel I lived at. I was out that night with a few co-workers, but learned later that one of the residents had gotten way too high on who knows which drug and started chasing down one of my friends inside the hostel while pointing a gun at him, yelling racist slurs and making death threats. He got arrested, but it was easy to say that most of the students living there no longer felt safe. While telling about the incident to one of my co-workers the next day, the big boss overheard the conversation and immediately came to check on me and make sure I was okay. I thought he was being very nice and thanked him for checking. He said I should not be staying at the hostel anymore given the circumstances, and invited me to stay in one of the hotel rooms free of charge for the next 2 weeks while I looked for a new place. That seemed very generous of him, especially given the fact the hotel would be completely booked often since it was peak ski season. I accepted his offer and moved in the next day. I was so overwhelmed with happiness but finally having some privacy. I was sharing a room with 5 other girls at the hostel, and getting some extra sleep before working my breakfast shift since I was literally now living at work. That was until one night later that week where I felt extremely exhausted after being slammed in the restaurant all day and delivering orders to several rooms. I was ready to get cozy in my hotel room and go to sleep. I think it was around 2 in the morning when I woke up completely groggy and noticed that my room was open. I could see the lights in the hallway. Then I noticed the silhouette of a tall person standing inside of my room and watching me sleep. I couldn't see a face but could definitely tell it was a man. As I started realising what's going on, I hear a metal clanking noise, as if he was getting ready to take his belt off. "What the F?" I yelled. The person quickly got out of my bedroom. The next day I asked management and my co-workers and said there was definitely someone in my room the night before. They said I was probably dreaming, or someone from housekeeping must have gotten into the wrong room. Wrong room at 2 in the morning. Housekeeping. The owner didn't comment on the case and stopped talking to me or even acknowledging my presence after that, to my relief, of course. Nothing else happened. I moved on, got a new job, a new apartment to live in, etc. About a year after my little incident, while checking the local Summit Daily News, who do I see on the front page? The owner. He'd been arrested the night before after getting 2 female hotel guests way too drunk at the bar and letting himself into their rooms once they had crashed for the night. They woke up and there he was, standing in the room staring at them, while getting ready to make his next move. They screamed bloody murder and called the police immediately. Was it him in my room that night? I'm 99% sure it was, but kind of relieved I didn't get to find out. What creeps me out the most about this situation is that, what about those nights I completely crashed after one too many drinks? You know how the altitude can affect your alcohol tolerance, and oh man, it really did for me. I'm from the sea level and not a big drinker, but a few times I woke up with zero memories from the night before. So the unsettling question is, was that the first time someone got in my room? And how many more guests at this hotel had this happened to without them even realising it? That is horrific. I hope I know she does not prove it was him, but I feel like if she went forward to the police it would help corroborate the other girl's story and hopefully lead to a more severe punishment for the owner. Oh yeah, it's horrible, isn't it? A nice additional bit of home invasion by the sound of it with this next one, titled "Someone Tried to Break Into My House and Find Me." This story happened 3 years ago, around the time that COVID started, so it was a while back but still worthy of a post. It was early 2020 and I'd just gotten a new job in a small town near my area. While looking for a place to live, my sister offered to rent her house to me. She'd bought the house 2 years prior, but she and her husband didn't really take to it, and their commute to work was long, so they moved out, and the house was uninhabited. Luckily for me, it was actually pretty close to my workplace, around a 40-minute drive, and my sister pretty much rented it to me for free. I just paid for the water and electricity and looked after the house. I was living there for a solid 2 or 3 months and I'd already gotten used to it. One night after coming back from work and parking my car, as I walked towards my door, I noticed something odd. There was a cigarette butt on the curb to my house. I leaned down and picked it up thinking it might have been mine since I'm a smoker, but after looking at the brand name, I realised it wasn't mine and threw it away. I didn't think much of it and just shrugged it off as some asshole throwing it at my curb. I went on with my night and nothing unusual happened. 2 days later I was once again walking to my house when I spotted a few more cigarette butts, this time near my porch. Needless to say I was pissed off and thought that someone sat on my porch and smoked. But since I didn't know who it was there, I could do nothing about it. I noticed that they were put out pretty recently, so whoever it was probably walked off as I was approaching. It's creepy in itself. That night I was watching a movie on my laptop and it was pretty late, past 1 AM, so I was surprised when I heard a car passing by. It's a suburban neighbourhood and it was COVID, so people rarely ventured out at night, but I didn't think much of it. Around half an hour later I was surprised when I heard chattering nearby. I listened intently, but I couldn't hear what they were talking about as their voices seemed almost muffled and quiet. But at this point I was getting a bit unnerved, so I stopped the movie and quietly got off my sofa and walked to the front door to make sure it was locked. As I was approaching the door, I froze mid-step as I heard the two approaching my porch and reducing their talking to a whisper. I realised right away that whoever this was wanted to break in. I leaned against my front door and waited, expecting a loud bang against the door or the doorknob being shaken, but it was oddly quiet. I decided to walk over to my window to see if they had walked away or changed their mind. My windows have bars from the inside out that you have to unlock so that you can move the curtains or look out of the window comfortably. I slowly unlocked the bar mechanism and lifted it up. I moved the curtains and was taken aback. Leaning up against my window was a man. He was as startled as I was because he basically stuttered over his own steps as he jumped back. He tightened his hoodie to cover his face, so all I could see was his big blue eyes looking at me. His friend realised what was going on and right away started to kick the door in. He kicked it a solid 4 or 5 times, but the door wouldn't budge. All the while I was staring at them frozen in fear and trying to comprehend apprehend the situation. I snapped out of it and slammed the bars over my window, locking them and running upstairs to the storage room where I pushed a table up to the door and called the cops. As I listened and expected the dude to come inside any minute, I heard a loud crash from the bars from the windows being shaken aggressively. When they realised that they couldn't get in one of them, they let out a long, angry scream that probably woke up half the neighbourhood. By the time the cops came, they were long gone. The police couldn't find out who it was, but were more active in the neighbourhood in the following weeks. Regardless, I wasn't so keen on staying there so shortly after I moved out. My sister sold the house a few months later, and as far as I know, nothing similar ever happened since. I honestly don't know what they wanted or why they were so determined to get in, but whoever it was, let's not meet again. It's, yeah, that's really weird, because on the one hand you have at first when it said one of the men was like really startled, I thought, oh, they just think the house is uninhabited and that's where they just go to hang out and smoke or whatever, and hence why he like shat himself when somebody turned out to be in. But then at that point they would just run away really quickly, surely. The fact that the other one has then tried to kick the door down, I guess would suggest slightly more like sinister intentions. I've just read that it's I assumed it was a woman in this story, but the guy clarified in the comments that he was a man. And he says he's a 6'4", 230-pound male. And he says the fact that he's so big makes him wonder even more why the dude was so keen on getting into his house. That's crazy. Also, like, why would you sort of pollute the crime area with your cigarette butts? Like, surely the cigarette butts would have like their saliva and DNA on it or whatever if something horrific did happen. Very weird, but equally very, very terrifying. Someone keeps knocking on my door late at night. In June of this year, I moved out of my parents' apartment as I finally got a steady job and longed for some sort of freedom. I looked for apartments that were affordable in my city and found one that's a 2 or 3 minute walk from my parents' apartment. I don't know what's going on in my stomach. To me it was perfect. I'd get to live alone and my parents would still be nearby so I could visit them whenever I wanted to pop in or have breakfast with them. The apartment itself is great. It's not really much to look at, but for a single male it's more than enough. My apartment has a long corridor connecting each room together from the sides, with my front door being at the start of the corridor. My bedroom is the second room on the left, but since the walls are pretty thin you can literally hear people in the apartment complex walking, talking, etc. from my bedroom. Last week I came home from the pub after meeting up with a few friends. It wasn't really late, around 10:15 or 10:30ish, and I had the day off, so I took a shower and hopped into bed to watch Netflix. It was probably around midnight when I heard a faint knock coming from the front door. I stopped the show that I was watching and listened for a minute or so and just thought that it was my mind playing tricks on me. I continued watching Netflix when once again I heard a 2-motion knock on my door. I sat up from bed, went to the door and looked through the peephole, and sure enough it was pitch black. I once again shrugged it off and went back to my room, but before I could even sit down properly, knock, knock, but slightly louder. At this point I thought it was my friends playing a prank on me, so I called my friend and asked if he was knocking on my door. And if he was, it wasn't funny. He paused for a second and said, "Dude, I'm at home, I have to be up at like 7:30. I believed him and hung up the phone. I was talking pretty loudly, so whoever was knocking probably heard me, and as soon as I hung up, I heard another knock. At this point, I was pretty pissed off, so I walked to the door, looked through the peephole, and saw nothing. I then unlocked the door, took a peek, and closed the door and locked it. Me being angry and a bit intoxicated, I decided to wait and catch whoever was knocking. So I spent a solid 10 minutes silently looking through the peephole before being a bit startled as someone put their hand over the peephole and knocked again. I immediately started unlocking the door and ran out to the apartment hall. I heard someone booking it down the steps and heard him supposedly lean against the wall as his drag jacket shrugged the wall. So I ran a few steps down before realising that whoever this is was waiting behind the corner to get the jump on me. I hurried back inside and called the cops. They were there within a few minutes and scanned the building and the street but couldn't find anyone. They told me that it could just be some kids pulling a prank and to never run after someone. They kept a patrol car around the entire night and the knocking stopped. It could have been some kids playing dumb, but the part of me that gave me the creeps was the fact that whoever it was ran down the stairs and stopped behind the corner. He didn't keep running. If it were some pranksters, I find it more likely that they would have just booked it outside. As I said, it's been a week and the knocking stopped. It kept me on edge for a few days because I just expected to be jumped by someone when walking into my apartment, but so far nothing has come of it. I've let it go and just hope that it won't happen again. Yeah, you have humongous balls chasing the person, like, I would not be leaving that flat. Yeah, someone commented, yeah, don't chase them down. They could have had been setting you up to chase them while another person waits till you're out of your apartment to enter it. Yeah, the fact that he's spot on, the fact that they stopped like round the corner is like, yeah, like, I'm not sure why they would do that. Oh, that's so creepy the way, like, they covered the peephole before knocking again, like, oh, I'm not sure if I'd, I'm not sure if I'd be able to deal with that. I don't have a peephole though, I've got a Ring camera. Would have been a nice segue into a brand deal, wouldn't it? This next story is titled "The Guy Down the Street." I, 30, female, used to live in a small neighbourhood from ages 13 to 18. This took place when I was around 15. I spent most of my time just walking around the neighbourhood listening to my MP3 player. There was a guy around the same age as me that lived maybe 5 or so houses down from me. From neighbourhood gossip, I learned that he was homeschooled and had been in and out of juvie due to his anger issues. He was almost always outside, and sometimes when I passed his house he would start following me. I was smart enough to always have my music down low enough to be able to hear and be aware of my surroundings. At first I just passed it off as he just ended up walking the same time of day I did. Looking back home truly was dumb. As time passed he got close and closer to me when following, until he eventually decided to come up right behind me. He said some truly heinous things that I will not repeat here. I mean, he was right in my ear when he was talking. I ran home and told my sister, who basically raised me. She told me I was lying and to stop making up stories. For a while I stopped going out walking until I needed the fresh air and exercise, and tried again after maybe 2 months. Sure enough, there he was and came right up behind me and started to say things again. I turned my music up and ignored him. is what I continued to do every day until he got tired of me ignoring him, I guess. Because one day he grabbed my arm. I couldn't get away, and then he grabbed at the back of my neck and told me that I should know better than to ignore him. Again, I told my sister, but she didn't believe me, and I stopped going out again. 2 weeks later, I woke up to 2 loud bangs on my bedroom wall. There was a garage on both sides of the house, and the wall of my bedroom shared a wall with one of the garages. This garage was unfinished. There wasn't even concrete down, and it was easily accessible from outside as it was missing the door at the back of the house. My sister was out of town and my dad was deaf and bedridden, so it was just me in the house, able to do anything. My bedroom also had a door to go outside, so I ran over and locked it. I lay down and waited for the banging to stop, but it didn't. My cousin and her boyfriend lived down the street, so I called her and she sent her boyfriend down to see what it was. Her boyfriend pulled right into the backyard and right up to the door into the garage. His headlights filled the garage and out ran the guy down the street holding a large knife. He took off running and my cousin's boyfriend followed. It was at this time I called the police. They came and took a statement but said there was nothing they could do because other than going into the garage and trespassing, he didn't actually do anything. I never took a walk in that neighbourhood again. I still wonder how he knew what wall to bang on. How did he know I was on the other side of it? How did he know my sister was gone or that my dad was bedridden and couldn't do anything? I never locked the door, so had he been in my house to know? What would have happened if I had gone outside? It still gives me the creeps. So guy down the street, let's not meet again. Yeah, that's horrific. That's clearly a stalker intending on inflicting harm. Like, he's followed you around the street when you've noticed him, but clearly he's also been following you when you haven't been able to see him, so he's probably just stood and waited and noticed and seen you spending a lot of time in that room and noticed that there's access to your room. But that is that is horrible. I'd say the first time round the sister saying you're making it up, fair enough, but the second time round, like, there's some pretty specifically bad stuff that I don't really think that a 15-year-old would make up, so I think a bit rubbish on her part, but blimey, yeah, not nice again. I keep saying that, I mean none of these are nice, let's be real. Kind of the point of the video. Next story is titled Someone is Watching Me. So, I've never posted on this sub, though I have other stories I've buried deep until recently, but this is happening in the present. I've had people stalk and follow me before, and because of that and my true crime addiction, I've become supremely paranoid and a solid curtain twitcher. I, 31 female, reside in an upstairs room that was my first room to myself as a child. I had to leave a bad situation and therefore ended up back at my childhood home. For reference, when our house was built, we were told that the field to our left, with horses and a barn at the time, would one day soon be a development. It was 2000 when we were told that, and it wasn't until 2022 that roads started being formed and foundations laid. I'd already had someone follow me home before when I was young, but I was in a different bedroom next door. My parents put me in a free library that's right below my window, and nighttime security lights that are very bright and turn on when you're within 20 inches of the side of my house my room is on. I'll admit having an open field next to me so long made me accustomed to not closing the curtains when I change, because there was never anyone to watch. Now there is. last 2 weeks the burglar light next to the free library have been going off late at night. Because my one side of the curtain is open so I can use my vape. That's the only reason I noticed at all. I didn't think too much at first. We lock all the doors and windows every night and I'm on the 2nd floor. I always looked out to see if it was a car, someone walking their dog or a deer, only to see nothing. To add, they put a ton of streetlights around this area so visibility is great. But it just kept happening. So last night I did my usual and I saw the lights come on out of my peripherals. I acted natural, giving full view out the window. I was going to bed, turning the TV off, closing the window and curtains, turning the light out. Then I ducked down, peering through the curtains to the sidewalk below. I honestly thought I was going to pass out when after a few minutes, maybe 5, someone comes out from the side of my house, all silhouette, dressed in black. They kept their back to me until I turned the light off, but I swear I could still see them standing there, looking up like they could see me. But while I was on the phone with the operator, I saw him run off. There wasn't much they could do, except say they'd have a car drive round and look. My parents are asleep and I know I have to tell them tomorrow. This scares the crap out of me. If it hadn't been happening for weeks and was a solo incident, I would probably be fine about it. But the fact that the light has been going off without me seeing activity, and what happened tonight, it makes me think this person has been watching me and watching my house. To the person outside my window, let's please never meet. They've given a small update. I did tell my parents and at first they brushed me off, claiming I'd had a couple drinks and it was late. So I probably just saw someone checking out the library. I then had another conversation about it with my dad, who said there had been reports the last couple of weeks of car break-ins, and since my car is parked on the side of my street right outside my window, maybe they were trying to break into it. I pointed out that if he was trying to get into my car, why was he pressed up against the house where he wasn't visible from my window? And why did he at no point go towards my car? I think I freaked him out enough that we are potentially going to get a camera for that area. Given all the development happening around us, I think it's smart even without this incident. Yeah, cameras up. Simple as that. I think it's the nice simple solution. Hopefully, anyway. And to finish this video, we have a story titled Roommate from Hell. Never move in with a man or woman you've never personally known. I got a roommate from hell this way. The man tortured me psychological when I turned his sexual advances down, then stole thousands of dollars from me over time. Even used my Amazon to open up an account. He got some of my personal info like social etc. as well. Once I left after calling the cops to help me leave, he showed up at the Apple store I was at just a day after I left. Even though I left to go live on the streets, brackets no family or friends as I was severely abused as a kid, I've been on my own since 14 actually, so I'm accustomed to surviving on the streets for periods of time. I was a million times happier than I ever was in his nice apartment surrounded by nice things and a fancy car. I felt so relieved even just living in a concrete garage. I was a million times happier sleeping on concrete with a pillow made of a towel and a tiny little blanket in the cold and heat than I ever was living there with him. He spent his time psychologically torturing me and I don't regret leaving at all. Goodness me. He'd bang on the wall across from mine every morning and late at night to startle me awake. He'd throw pebbles or tap on my window in the middle of the night to scare me and keep me on edge. He'd give me weird little candies and teddy bears as if we were dating. Even ordered stalkerish love items from my own Amazon account. If I'd go to the restroom, he'd run and kick his foot at the door so loud and suddenly that it sounded like a door being kicked down. He'd steal my items if I left them alone for even a second, so I'd have no way to go out if I had plans. Then he'd put them back once I mentioned them, or when it was too late for me to leave for my plans. If I got any mail or a package, he'd interrogate me. What did you order? I need to know. Like he owned me or something. Towards the end I was leaning doors and furniture up against the door because he picked my bedroom lock before while I was gone, and when I'd wake up sometimes there was stuff missing or moved in odd ways, so I knew he was creeping around while I was asleep. If I was happy or in a good mood, he'd start criticising and nitpicking at my body, hair, face, behaviour, voice, etc. Anything he thought I was insecure about. I even developed an ED because he always did this and mocked/laughed at me when I would make or eat food. Any time I'd leave my bedroom, he would rush out of his room to stand right behind or near me, like a weird little dog that follows you around panting. Oh gosh. He'd even pierce in my hair products, skincare products, vitamins, etc. He'd throw out food I just bought, steal my cash and even use my credit cards. He even ordered 30 to 40 plus items off my Amazon account without my knowledge or consent. It was the strangest thing. If anyone else had dealt with this, they'd go insane. I still have trouble believing this stuff happened, as it was just so crazy to even think that someone is crazy enough to do this. It's not even like a story, that is just absolutely horrific. That's probably like the worst of the bunch. I really hope this person has found a nice place now and sorted themselves out a little bit, because she obviously just felt so trapped and didn't have any other alternative. Did you ever try to go to the police about this? His behaviour is extremely alarming. And she said I did. They helped me get my things from the apartment on the day I left. They helped me a lot. Thankfully I've moved on from that situation. It truly just blows my mind that there are people that evil and tortured and horrific out there that genuinely exist. But yeah, a lovely, positive